Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Mark Moses of WLZR in Melbourne, Florida. Mark and I will talk Florida football and also the SEC. We thank our podcast presenting sponsor, WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. WellSpire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-sponsor, the Well Coffee House. They turn coffee into water and have a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news today presented by Sutherland & Belk, a Nashville-based injury law firm. Sutherland & Belk is committed to fighting for those who've been injured in car, motorcycle, and truck accidents. Check them out at sbinjurylaw.com. Astros outfielder Tony Kemp has been designated for assignment by Houston. Watch for the former Vanderbilt star, who was the 2013 SEC Player of the Year, to probably be traded in the next week as the MLB trade deadline is upon us. Today's guest line is presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for years. They're phenomenal. Had no idea what I was missing until I got them. Their sheets are fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women who are treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress, which was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled BOLL. Enter the promo code Vandy. Get $50 off your first set of sheets. Mark Moses joins me now. It's weird to be on the other end of this. I've been on his shows a lot. He is at WLZR in Melbourne, Florida. Mark covers the SEC and lots of other things. Mark, good to have you on today.
Chris, thank you for having me on. I'm a big fan of yours because you actually help support Vandy sports, all right? Not many guys in the SEC want to do that. You do it for a living. You are the man. I want you to know that.
It's not the largest market to cover. It's not like the one you cover down in Florida for sure.
Well, the thing with Florida is, and people forget this, like Gainesville's really not that big of a town. It's a college town. But when you have millions upon millions of people live in Florida, it's not just Gainesville. You got fans in Jacksonville. You got them in the Panhandle, Gainesville, Orlando, where I'm at, Space, Treasure Coast, Tampa, even in Miami. The whole state goes for the Gators when you really think about it with the fan base.
That is one of the strangest sports states to figure out because you've had spring training baseball there for forever, but the locals don't support the Marlins or the Rays. Football, it just seems like, is king down there, but that's a little bit of a fickle fan base. I think they turn on you pretty quickly at Florida and probably Florida State when things don't go well. And, attendance figures for basketball, for what Florida was back in the day, it just never seemed like the fervor matched the accomplishments. I just look at that state from a distance with all its people and all the teams and all the success some of those teams have had, and I just feel like those teams a lot of times seem under-supported.
What's interesting with the state, and I was thinking about this the other day, is the kids in this state play football. And not only do they play it really well. I mean, this week I'm doing a lot of, just like probably you are as well, where a lot of high school camps are starting for the new fall season. And I'm talking to different coaches. And in my county alone, I mean, we have 500,000 people in this county. And we have 17 different high school teams playing football. Every coach that comes on talks about he's got 2 or 3 kids where massive Power 5 schools are after them. I mean, if it's Cocoa, if it's Melbourne, just some of these different schools. I'm not kidding around when I say that. When I grew up in the Midwest, we had some great high school football teams in the different states. I lived in Iowa, Illinois, but we didn't have 5-star athletes playing at these schools. That's what's so interesting with this state. And I agree with you they'll turn on you quickly. I mean, you look at the NFL teams, Buccaneers, Jaguars, and Dolphins. They're usually done by October. They're out of the race, where people are just like, I'm sick of these teams. But when you look at the kids in Florida, they grow up wanting to play football. That's their outlet. I always see these other countries where soccer's their outlet. Or if you're from a New York, Chicago, those type of cities, basketball is your outlet. That is your ticket to go and have a better life for yourself. Here in Florida, it starts early, Chris, at a young age, where these kids want to play peewee, they want to play high school, then they want to play college, then they want to go to the NFL. We have actual NFL players that play from this state. That's the difference between when I was in Nebraska, in Omaha, covering the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They're a great football power, but no kids in the state can play at that level. Here, we have teams from all over the country trying to poach the kids from Florida to go play big-time college football. That's what makes Florida so interesting, is the kids here actually go play big-time football, if it's college or the NFL.
Well, as you say, talent has never been the issue in and around the Florida program. Obviously, that state produces an incredible number of players, but success has kind of been waning this decade in some ways.
Oh, look, hey, here's what's interesting, is Florida and Florida State's the number one rivalry. Those are the two biggest brands in the state. I mean, I've been here, 6 years. This will be the 7th football season I'll cover, which I don't even know how that happened. But I always say, if you're going to rank all the brands in Florida, Florida and Florida State are the number one. Those two are the biggest brands in the state. They are. That's the biggest fan base. Those are the teams that won the most titles. They're it. And what's interesting is, you noticed one has been up and one has been down. In the 90s, they were both up. Even Miami was up. But right now, what's interesting is we went through a cycle where Jimbo Fisher was great, Florida State was great, Heisman trophies, championships, and Florida was down. Hiring new coaches, firing coaches. They weren't going to bowl games. And then all of a sudden, you see a switch now where now, and look, I could be wrong, now Florida State is down. Florida looks like it's starting to go up. That's what's interesting with the state right now, and especially with recruiting, where Florida looks like they're getting some of the top talent. And it's weird, and it's like how you cover the SEC. People are like, oh, well, Georgia and Bama are at another level when it comes to recruiting. They're amazing, and the Gators are lacking. They're not as good. You look at recruiting, Gators are third. If you're the third best team in the SEC with recruiting, that's still pretty good. That's better than probably anything in the Big 12, the Big 10. I can keep going if you want. But right now, Florida's up, Florida State's down. And it's funny, the Florida State fans, they've been very quiet over the last 2 years. Usually they got their big chest out and they're talking trash and they're winning titles. They've been very quiet, Chris. That's what's interesting with this state right now.
Well, let's transition to Dan Mullen in Florida. I was reading a comment in Lindy's. It was interesting. He said, I think Dan Mullen's going to have to change his recruiting philosophy where he was finding players and developing them into SEC stars. He said now his challenge is to get 5-star players and develop them in NFL players, which I thought was so true. It seemed like his impact in 1 year has been tremendous. I'm with you. I think that's a program. Dan Mullen is not my favorite person in the world, but there is no question that the guy can coach football. I look back and I think Tennessee kind of dragged its feet on maybe landing him, and now that seems like sort of a no-brainer. And I think that Dan is going to win a lot of games in Florida as long as he is there. How has he changed that program just in the limited time that he's been there?
Here's what's interesting. There's two parts of Dan Mullen. Number one, he was the offensive coordinator under Urban Meyer. He's the one that developed Tim Tebow. He was that guy winning championships as the coordinator. He had to leave, though. Fans now are saying, oh, well, he should have just taken over for Urban Meyer. No. This worked out for a reason. He had to go get his chops as head coach of Mississippi State. He had to learn to be a coach in this conference, recruit in this conference, and have that little chip on his shoulder being in an underdog-type program like that. Now he comes to Florida, and he understands what to do. He has that pedigree of being a head coach. That's what they needed. That was perfect. That Jim McElwain, who was head coach, but he wasn't ready for the SEC. He wasn't an SEC guy. He wasn't. I know he was with Bama, but he wasn't an SEC Florida guy. Maybe that's a better way to put it. And then two, people forget this now, including Gator Nation. Don't forget, the first choice for this job was Chip Kelly. Scott Strickland, the athletic director, went up to New Hampshire area and tried to get Chip Kelly. He turned him down and said, I'm going to Hollywood. I'm going to UCLA. That was the best thing that could ever happen to Florida. But it didn't end there. Their second choice was Scott Frost. At UCF, they talked to him. He said, no, I can't do that because, as we know, Nebraska's dream job called him and said, we need you to come here and fix Nebraska football. When Tom Osborne calls you, your college football coach, Hall of Famer, you got to take that job. He had to go to Nebraska. I understand. I mean, that's a whole other story where I still think Scott Frost should be the coach of UCF, but he had to go to Nebraska. He was the third choice, Dan Mullen, the third to be the head coach of the University of Florida. When you look at it now, he should have been the first choice. He's perfect. And to answer your question, what's the best way to describe it and what he's done? The last couple off seasons, I've had to constantly talk about problems where people are getting arrested and credit card fraud and this guy's transferring. This has been, this is not good for me in Sports Talk Radio. This has been the most quiet it has been in the offseason for the Florida Gators. It's great. That's what he's done. He's brought stability there. He made Felipe Franks into an actual SEC quarterback. They won 10 games. They won the Peach Bowl. They beat up on Michigan. And the expectations, especially if they beat Miami, are going to be higher this season as well. That's what Dan Mullen's brought to the table.
Well, you kind of led into my next question, which was about stability. Like you said, they've had all those credit card things and the messes, and I think they've got one with Title IX that's flown a little bit under the radar too, which I think is – those are the kind of things a lot of times that disrupt a season. You've certainly seen that happen at Florida. Mullen had his share of stuff at Mississippi State from time to time as well. But some coaches seem like Urban Meyer had all kinds of stuff, and they were able to manage distractions like that of all sorts. You've seen other coaches, Butch Jones at Tennessee could not. The previous coach at Florida, whose name already escapes me, Jim McElwain, that stuff ripped his program apart. That's kind of my one concern with Dan Mullen is it just seems like it's been just chaos down there. Good grief, look at Urban Meyer's stuff and the players down there with Aaron Hernandez, and yet they, in spite of all the chaos and stuff, managed to win national titles. I guess that's my question about Mullen. I think you've already answered it, but that to me, they'll always have the talent. He's a good head coach. That is the thing to me that probably is the biggest threat to him is just that stability and the discipline issue.
I always say this, and I've covered the SEC, the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, even smaller conferences as well. There's always knuckleheads on every team, Chris. Come on, you've done this a long time. Every program, there's a couple knuckleheads. And how many guys you got on the team? 70 or 80 kids? You're going to have some problems. You are. You really are. The problem with Florida was, and the same thing with Florida State, they were like actual criminal charges. It's not like, we were drinking on a Friday night and, whatever. Boys will be boys. These are like real criminal charges, like real problems that were going on. That's when it's a little embarrassing after a while. You really need to clean it up. And you're talking about Urban Meyer. Look, you talk about those teams that are winning titles. Yeah. There were some bad hombres, if you want to use it like that, on that team. But winning is everything. If you win, we'll put up a lot of stuff. And, hey, as a fan, I have my favorite teams. And you know what? I'll put up with some stuff. I won't lie to you. If we're winning the Super Bowl or something, I can put up with a lot of nonsense. I really can. I won't lie to you, Chris.
Yeah, there's nonsense, and then there what happened under Urban. You got a serial killer on the team. It's not really funny, but it's something, it sounds crazy to say, and I'll never forget what somebody on that beat told me when I asked him about just what went on under Urban. He said, the crazy thing is, he said, I'm not even sure Aaron Hernandez was the worst guy on that team.
Well, good thing they had Tebow.
Tebow. I think Tebow balanced out a lot of stuff down there.
Do you know that they had at one point, I know this is crazy to say, you think about recruiting the quarterback position. They had Chris Leak on there, who won a national title. And when he was in the title game, the announcers were like, yeah, Chris Leak's great and all. By the way, he's winning the national title game. Yeah, but you got to see this Tebow guy. I remember in the game in 2006, you got to see this Tebow guy. You got to see him. Tebow wins Heisman. Then you have Cam Newton on that team. Cam Newton can't get on the field. Cam Newton, who won the Heisman Trophy national title and was the number one pick in the draft, MVP, and played in the Super Bowl, couldn't get on the field. That's recruiting, my friend. I know we rip Urban Meyer. That is unbelievable what he did with that football program. Yeah,
and Leak was a really highly regarded quarterback prospect. He didn't have the pro upside, but I think he was the number 1, number 2 quarterback prospect in the country, maybe, or according to some people. I think opinions may have been divided, but it wasn't like he lacked for talent either.
Hey, that's funny you bring that up because, outside of the stadium, you have the 3 statues of the 3 Heisman winners. You got Werfel, Spurrier, and you got Tebow. And my dad always loves when we went there for the first time. He's like, hey, Mark, isn't it funny where Werfel and Spurrier are throwing the ball, but Tebow's running the ball? He couldn't get over that. It was like it blew his mind when he saw it for the first time. But I was like, Chris Leak doesn't get the credit he deserves. He won a championship as the starting quarterback of the Gators. I don't think he gets the love he should with this program.
Well, speaking of getting love, before I get back into football, I got to ask you, if Tim Tebow were to start a cult down there, how big of a following would it have?
I tell people this all the time. People nationally will rip him. And there's parts of me I understand. Like, I don't like that he's playing baseball. I think he still should be in the NFL. I think he should have played another position, and he could have had a 10-year career. That's what I think he really should have done. That's where I have some problems with it. But when it comes to, like, charity work and trying to give back to the community, he does a great job. He really does. And I try to remind people, he's from Florida. You're in a state, and I know half the fan base is Florida State, but you have a lot of people in the state that love Tebow. He won a championship for Florida. So it's funny when I have, national sports radio shows on my radio station. You'll look up and, Tebow's an idiot. He's stupid. I go, whoa. You're in the one state that actually likes Tim Tebow. Don't forget that. And I have to remind people that, Chris.
I don't know how you could dislike the guy. I really don't. I mean, I get the baseball thing, but I always liked for him, always rooted for him. I wished it had worked out in the NFL, but just in terms of the kind of person he is, I think he's the kind of guy that I think that the way he conducted himself and did his business, it's just hard to find flaws with him.
Okay, you know what's funny? Here's your story. You're only going to get this from me. None of your other guests are going to have this, all right? Here's the real insight. So my parents, they live in Port St. Lucie, just south of me. That is the spring training home of the New York Mets. So I go to spring training every February and March. I go. Even though I don't like the Mets, but I was like, hey, it's in the town, we'll go. So Tebow is there. He's at spring training. And everyone's like, hey, it's Tebow. And there's like a big fan base to see Tebow, all the Gator fans. He wasn't even the best former Florida Gator in spring training there. It's the weirdest story. It's like a Disney movie. Everyone's giving Tim Tebow all the love. The best former Florida Gator in camp, who's their best player now, is Pete Alonso, who played for Gator baseball and made the College World Series. You saw him win the home run derby. He's going to be the centerpiece of the Mets moving forward. He made the club out of spring training. He's a rookie. He's the best former Florida Gators player, Chris. That's the craziest story with Tebow.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It is just the enthusiasm for him down there has been a fever pitch. But I want to go back to the current team, and it was almost like a running joke. You would have me on your show, and we'd talk about preseason expectations, and we would get into Florida and talk about the offense, and you could probably just feel me rolling my eyes on the other end because it's always going to be, oh, they got this talent, they got all these things. I'm like, yeah, when's the last time Florida's offense was any good? And that's usually how it turned out. Well, last year, Dan Mullen kind of fixed that, I think.
The thing with Gator Nation is they still want it to be Spurrier 90s football. That's never going to happen again. No. And Dan Mullen is kind of that prototype of Urban Meyer. When you had Tebow and Chris Leak, you weren't throwing the ball 50 times a game. You were not doing that. But what Mullen did was he kind of slowed things down and said, here's what we need to do. Let's get back to the basics, and let's just have a good offense. Let's not go from beyond awful to awesome. Let's take little baby steps. What people forget is Felipe Franks started every game, but he was benched late in the game, I believe, was it Missouri? And then during the week, you had Kyle Trask have the number one reps. Then he got injured on a play, so they went back to Felipe Franks. And then maybe that was something that finally woke up Franks, and maybe in a weird way it did. And then he won his last 4 games, especially he played well against Florida State, and then he played really good against Michigan. And people don't talk about that. They just think, oh, Franks was great all 12 games last year. He was not. He was not, Chris. But now you saw it in the spring game. Franks is your guy. And now in the fall, Franks is going to be your starter. He is going to be against Miami. He is your guy. And look, he was a Jim McElwain recruit, but now he's starting to look like maybe he is like a Dak Prescott type player. I mean, in that mold of here's what we need from the quarterback position. He's not going to throw for 300 yards, but he's going to command this offense. And I think transfers at the wide receiver position have been really key for this team as well, where you know Grimes, and then you put him with Cleveland, and Kadarius Toney's another guy that they're going to try to get into this offense. And then also, an offensive line is going to be a question mark for this team. It will be, because I know they had some guys that got drafted this past year. But I think with LaMichael Pirine, I am really banking on him to have a big year. And a crazy stat, the Gators have not had a 1,000-yard rusher in a long time. I think Pirine might be that guy who can get them going. I think, look, they're not going to have a top 10 offense, but I think they're going to have a good offense again here in 2019.
And I'm trying to think who their last 1,000-yard rusher was. They had a grinded out back, I want to say 8 or 9 years ago, who might have led the league in rushing, but I can't even remember the kid's name. I think he was kind of a washout in the NFL. Do you remember who I'm thinking of?
Yeah, you know what? I'm thinking of it as well. You know what's funny? Isn't that pretty, pathetic, where we can't even think of the guy's name? It's been so long for the Gators. I mean, look, you have so many two-back systems in college football now as well, so I know it's hard to get the 1,000-yard runner, but all right, you know what? Now I'm going blank on the name. I'm giving you all this Gator knowledge, and I can't think of the guy's name.
I want to say he played for the Steelers, but I can't think of it either. Anyway, yeah, it's been a while. I mean, really, even the Spurrier teams, I guess they had some runners. They had who was the kid
Fred
in the late?
Taylor.
Yeah, Fred Taylor. There were a couple other backs, but it really has been a drought for them, say the last 10 or 15 years. But I mean, they never really needed it under Spurrier, or not under Spurrier, but under Urban Meyer.
No, you really didn't, because you had so many different weapons with this team, especially from Tebow and all these receivers as well. It has really changed. I'm trying to look up your guy. You're talking. I'm trying to find if I can find the guy's name. I know I'm going to think of it after a while.
Yeah, I am too. It's bugging me to death. It was a guy that I think kind of
here's your guy.
Did it on volume.
I got it. Okay, here's what you have. It's Mike Gillislee.
Yes, that's who it is. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Well, let's talk about the surrounding cast. I know Van Jefferson is another one of the guys at their receiving core. They got almost all those guys back. Pirine really busted out at the end of the year. I don't know if there's any stars there, but it seems like they've got a lot of athletes who can do some stuff if you get the ball in their hands.
If you're talking wide receiver, yeah, they're not. Look, this team, I can't stress this enough. They're not going to be Oregon with Marcus Mariota. They're not. I'm telling you, the guy who they've been waiting 2 years to finally break out and be the Percy Harvin is the guy I just said a second ago, Kadarius Toney. That's the guy. He is dangerous. If you can find ways to get him the ball, he could be the best receiver on this team. Cleveland's your deep threat. There are some guys. If you can get Kadarius Toney the ball, then this team can be very good this year. He's the key to this offense when it comes to the wide receiver position.
The one constant for Florida is that other side of the ball, Mark. Every year, the names change. It does not seem to matter. They have NFL-level defensive backs, a lot of times first and second round picks. They always have defensive linemen. I just look at what they've got this year, and it's just more of the same.
Yeah, it's DBU. Them and LSU, they like to fight with each other. Who has the best DBU? I mean, we had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's from this area, Cocoa, Florida. He went in the later rounds to Saints, New Orleans Saints. He was probably their best player from the DB this year. C.J. Henderson is probably your guy in the secondary. There's some other guys, but the key is, can they get the pass rush, and can DBU get some interceptions? I feel like with this team is maybe for the first time in maybe a decade or so, maybe it's not everything on the defense. I mean, under Muschamp and McElwain, everything was like, well, if the defense can get 3 turnovers and score some touchdowns and then hold the other team to 12 points, maybe our offense can hit some field goals and we can win some games. And that's what they would do after a while. I mean, it was pathetic to say, but that's what happened. I feel like if the offense can give me 25 points, then maybe the pressure's not on the defense every single game. Maybe that's something also that Dan Mullen's bringing to the table when you look at this football franchise. That's why the defense, there's going to be a lot of question marks, and there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to have to step up and become new leaders of this team. But, it's Florida. They're going to have studs all over the field on defense, but it's going to be a lot of no-names until they can really solidify themselves as we get to mid-season, maybe October or so.
Mark, let's talk SEC East. It seems like there's Georgia and then a little bit of a drop-off to Florida, and then from there, probably a drop down to Missouri in the opinions of most, and then probably the next most talented team. South Carolina's got a good argument. It remains to be seen if that schedule breaks them. Then you have Tennessee, Vandy, Kentucky. I don't really know what order to put those three in. Everybody in the media has put Vandy last. That's kind of to me, not so fast. They've got a couple of All-Americans on offense, and they've beaten Tennessee 3 years in a row. But how do you see the architecture of the SEC East when it's all said and done?
Well, every person that's come on my show who's a voter just says Georgia. There's no hesitation in their voice. I'm like, really? We can't even play the games? No, Georgia. Georgia's the best. Georgia's amazing. And you know what? Georgia does have studs all over the field. I mean, they are killing it on recruiting. I'm amazed by the job that coaching staff has done there. I mean, there are 5 stars everywhere on the field. The thing with them is I don't want to watch them lose to Alabama again. I don't want to just keep seeing that. I've seen that rerun before. I don't want to keep watching that. I don't. Could someone else get a chance and lose to Alabama? That's how I feel after a while with the SEC. But the whole season is going to come down to, you know what? It's Florida, Georgia. That's what it is every year. It's going to happen again. They play around Halloween. Last year, the Gators were in the game till the fourth quarter. The difference was the quarterback play. Right now I'm going Georgia's the best team, Florida, and then Missouri, just like you said as well. But what's funny with Missouri, I had a guy come on my show the other day where they're like, hey, don't forget, they have that, what is it, the Clemson quarterback who transferred there? What if he's good? I mean, isn't that one of the biggest question marks for the SEC East? And look, Missouri has won the East a couple times since they've joined the Southeastern Conference. That's a question mark for me. And I think I go back to the Gators. If the Gators can beat Georgia, they're going to Atlanta. They are. Gators have a very tough schedule. They really do. But they can beat Georgia, then that's it. They're going to win the East. That is what's going to happen. I know I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it comes down to that. It's Florida and Georgia. But right now, every single person you talk to, and their mother and a dog, they love the Georgia Bulldogs. They can't get enough. I mean, what do you think, Chris? Are you going to Georgia as well?
This is where I'm not as sure. I mean, everybody talks about the talent they have, and to me, it's kind of like a baseball program I covered with Vanderbilt. It's like, okay, you may not know all the names, but if you're close to the program and follow them, you're like, man, this kid's really, really good, and maybe a major league ball player. He just couldn't get on the field last year because they got this guy, and this guy in front of them. Georgia football is kind of in the same spot, but what their returning receivers caught just a small handful of passes. So it's one of those things at the same time where you don't know. I mean, you really don't know until a guy gets out and proves it in game time. That is kind of my hesitation. It is not the names that we know with Georgia. It seems like they have just, I'm not going to say they've ascended to the top of everybody's list on cachet because I don't know if that's fair or not. The legitimate talent might be there. But the fact that I don't know all the names and that they've got some places where they've not had players who have proven it has given me pause a bit too, Mark.
I know. They haven't won a championship either. Don't forget that.
But I can give them a pass on that because of you-know-who.
Oh, that guy?
Yeah, that guy.
You mean the one? Yeah, that guy where he didn't win his division or conference and then somehow got into the college football playoff and then won in overtime? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, man. Well, hey, Georgia should have beaten Bama in that SEC title game. They should have done it. They really have. And if they go back to Atlanta for a third time and they take on Bama and they lose again, then what? Then what happens with Kirby Smart? I mean, what's the fan base say then? Like, well, what's going on here? We have all these 5 stars. Why can't we win? I mean, isn't that what's going to happen after a while?
I think at that point you just wait out Nick Saban to retire.
But the guy in Clemson's not ritiring. What about him then?
That's a good point. That's an excellent point.
He ain't going nowhere, buddy. Nowhere.
There's really nothing wrong with finishing second or third in the country. I know that sounds crazy to SEC fans, but that's like, I know Georgia fans want a title, but you could also have Rig off again.
I know, man. It's so great. I got a stat for you for your podcast. So we've had the playoff for 5 years. We're going to enter year 6. 9 teams have made the playoff. That's it. How many people play college football at the Power 5 level? 100? something like that, whatever it is.
Power 5 is what, 65, and I think you've got, what, 131?
Yeah.
There's 128. Yeah. I mean, I think a couple teams dropped out, but it's about 130.
So 5 years in, 4 slots every year, 9 teams have made it. And then the title game, where 2 teams make it, we've had 5 teams make it. 5. So in the playoff era, 9 teams have made it, 5 teams have played in the title game. What? Wait, how did that happen? That's what's so crazy. I did not see that coming with the playoff. And what's funny is I can name them for you off the top of my head. I know, this is amazing now. You go Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oregon, Florida State, Michigan State, Washington. Am I missing anyone? Is there someone? Or Georgia. Those are the 9. Who's played in the title game? I'm doing this off the top of my head. Who's been in the title game? Oregon, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Clemson. Who else?
Clemson, Alabama. You said Florida State and Oregon and Georgia. I mean, yeah, it seems to me like if I'm doing my predictions for 2023, let's see, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Pick 4 of the 5.
Yeah, that's it. The first title game did not have the SEC or the ACC. That's your crazy stat.
Yeah.
How's that possible?
That changed in a hurry.
Yeah, it was Big Ten versus Pac-12, like it was the Rose Bowl. It was Ohio State versus Oregon. That feels like it was 30 years ago. It's like it's not even allowed now, Chris. Like, how dare you make the title game? How dare you?
It's almost like the college football gods just conspired and said, let's do it this way just to give everybody a little bit of hope. And then, like Lucy, we'll just yank the football away the next year.
Oh, and by the way, if Oklahoma gets back to the playoff with a 3rd straight quarterback, Lincoln Riley, just put him in the Hall of Fame. That's all.
Exactly.
Just put him in the Hall of Fame, buddy. And if Blake Sims, or I'm not sorry, not Blake Sims. I'm thinking he played for Alabama.
Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts.
If Jalen Hurts wins the Heisman Trophy, then Lincoln Riley will really go to the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
He'd have to. Like, if that would happen, then I think he gets a call to the NFL. I think it would happen then. Like, all right, let's go. You got to do this at the NFL level. Come on. I think he would.
Yeah, but let me ask you. And I get that coaching at the highest level has an appeal. And I guess if you're Lincoln Riley, that's the great situation because you can always come back. I mean, if Lincoln Riley goes to the NFL and fails for 2 years, the line of schools lined up to grab him would be astronomical. So, I mean, it would make a ton of sense.
Hey, Nick Saban won championships with LSU, then went to Miami, was a disaster, and then the Alabama thing happened. Remember, it's a what if. What if he is a good NFL coach with the Dolphins? What if that works out and he never goes to Alabama? That's a what if we don't think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I guess that my hesitation to going to the NFL is the Saban thing proved the grass isn't always greener on the other side. On the other hand, you don't have to deal with recruiting. And it's like I said, you just it's not like anybody is going to hold that against Lincoln Riley if that's what he decides to do, should that option be presented to him.
Hey, it's very true. The way you can talk to an 18-year-old compared to a 38-year-old is very different. What was it? Bob Knight always said, like, in college, the coach is making more than the players. And then in the NBA, the players make more than the coach. That's the difference.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know you've already given me longer than we talked about, so I'm going to drop a couple of questions for the mailbag so I can get you out of here. This has been fun, but I know you've got stuff to do. Our mailbag is presented by Vanderbilt Fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. Are you in the market for auto, motorcycle, home, renters, or landlord insurance? What about life or commercial insurance? Call Josh, 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Hope you'll make him yours as well. And don't forget to call Josh about sponsorship opportunities for Camp Horizon. That is a really well-run camp for kids with cancer. So give Josh a ring and see if you can help there. Okay, Doorfan says, what can we share about what really happened in the dust-up between Derek Mason and Dan Mullen? The blindside hit was a cheap shot, to be sure. Todd Grantham, who, of course, was Florida's defensive coordinator, has a clear history of having a screw loose. Would like to know some of what was said and who instigated it. My money is on Grantham. Then he wants to know how Grantham was received at Florida, given that he made the choke gesture to the Gators kicker and now works there. Now, to refresh your memory, Vanderbilt in Florida had a benches clearing near brawl last year. I don't think any punches were thrown. I don't even remember exactly what precipitated it, but you had Derek Mason and Todd Grantham, who had a history with Vanderbilt before in the shouting match with James Franklin. So that's a lot to unpack there. What do you remember about that whole dust-up last year?
Wait. Why are they asking us? You need to get those coaches on. We need to get their official statement. Forget about what we think in this dust-up. Look, they're just yelling at each other. Come on. That was nothing. Did you see the Yasiel Puig Reds fight last night? Did you see that?
Oh my goodness, yes. That was the dumbest sports fight ever, because you got Amir Garrett on the mound, and I'm like, he just runs over to take on the entire Pirates dugout. I'm like,
yeah.
You might have your intelligence questioned if you do something like that.
What was funny was it wasn't even after a play. The coaches were talking to him on the mound. There was no play that happened. It all bottled up, and he looked at the dugout like you're saying, and then started running over there. And then Yasiel Puig, who got traded during the game, started fighting with them as well. Technically, he wasn't even on the Cincinnati Reds, and he was fighting for people as well. It was incredible. The one with Vandy in Florida, I'm sorry to say this, I don't even remember it after a while. I don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that. It was a fight, but it was nothing like what we had last night there in Cincinnati.
Yeah, the Cincinnati fight had so many great elements to it. You had Puig fighting who'd been traded 25 minutes before. You had the whole stupidity by Amir Garrett. And I don't even know exactly what precipitated that, but it sure was. We don't have a lot of bench-clearing brawls in baseball anymore, but I think that was one to talk about.
It makes me laugh. Hopefully you and me never get to that, where we're bench clearing against each other. Let's hope that never happens, Chris.
I'm smart enough to know that I don't need to get in a bench clearing brawl with professional athletes.
Hey, but if we were teammates and a guy went for your head, I got your back. I hope you know that's right on your podcast. You could quote me on that. I have your back, Chris.
What I want to know is if Puig knew he'd been traded.
I bet you he did. That makes it even better. Like, what do I have to lose? I won't even be in the National League in another 20 minutes. Who cares? Well, that's what I imagine Puig was like.
The Reds had to love it because unless it derails the trade, if he gets suspended, he'll be serving that as an Indian.
That's a good point. And remember, the guy he got traded for, Trevor Bauer, his last outing was they told him to get out of the game, and he threw the ball into the outfield, and it went over the fence. So those two guys were both pretty much kicked out or told to leave. Isn't that crazy? That was the trade.
All right, I'm going to test your fringe baseball knowledge here. I have seen one other player leave a game and respond by throwing the ball over the center field fence. You were really good if you can name this guy.
I can't. I'm sorry. I give up. White flag. Who is it?
Well, as soon as I say the name, you'll be like, of course. It was Rob Dibble.
Rob Dibble, huh? That's your guy.
That's my guy, former Nashville Sound. But anyway, I digress. Let me give you one more question. And this may be tough for you to answer because he didn't have really much of a role at Florida. But Mr. Vandy wants to know if you know anything about Malik Langham from the time he spent at Florida. He was a reserve defensive lineman who was transferred from Vandy. He was a 4-star recruit who Vanderbilt really targeted, and of course now is transferred to Vandy.
No, I can't answer your question. You have this sponsored, and I can't answer your questions correctly. This is a problem. Can you give me a softball? Do you have any of those? Like, hey, when am I getting married? Can you do those type of questions, please?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've asked you questions about Rob Dibble and about a redshirt who never played. So this has been great podcasting, right?
Yeah, let me tell you something. I feel like my own confidence. I feel like I gave you real insight into SEC football and the Gators. And then we end with, like, I'm throwing a perfect game, and now it's the 8th inning, and I've thrown, like, 5 straight home run pitches. This is the problem here. I'm ending with a crash and burn on your podcast. I can't have this happen, buddy. It's not good.
That was kind of like the bonus question. I feel like you'd already locked in your accomplishments. It's like the, I don't know. I'm running out of analogies, and I think the podcast is running out of steam at this point, too. I've got my son in my office bugging me about something, and it just seems like we've run our course today.
I'll tell you this. I have covered National Signing Day for about a decade now in different conferences. Every recruit is awesome. Doesn't matter what school you cover, every recruit's amazing. All these guys are going to play. They're amazing. We have all these 3, 4, 5-star athletes. We're going to be awesome. Everything's fine. And then 2 years later, you get those questions like you got. Hey, what happened to this guy? Hey, what about that guy? Well, guess what? They all can't play. They're not all going to be good. It's not going to work. That's what I try telling people. Signing day, everyone's awesome. Then 5 months later, what happened to that guy? Happens all the time. And especially with the transfer portal, Chris, now guys won't even play for you. Even just because you got them doesn't mean they're going to play. I mean, Tate Martell is going to be the starting quarterback in Miami. He should be on Ohio State right now. But they can't because Justin Fields, who is 5-star to Georgia, he wants to be the quarterback there. So honestly, I don't even know what to say about signing day anymore. That's my mic drop for you.
I will give you my favorite National Signing Day related story. I remember Vanderbilt had a kid, this has been about 8, 9, 10 years ago, named Nash Nance. He was a quarterback from Georgia. He was committed in their class. And you watched the tape and you kind of scratched your head and said, I'm not really sure what they see here. Like, his highlight film was a bunch of 7-yard slants completed downfield. And just like, I don't really know what's special about this kid. And like most fan bases will have the halo effect around the kids that they sign. And even guys on my board were like, I don't know about this one. And when he decommitted and committed to Tennessee, a lot of people were actually celebrating that. And I remember listening to national radio on signing day. And I don't even remember who the analyst was, but they were like, who's the sleeper nationally that people need to know about? And somebody said, Nash Nance just signed at Tennessee, maybe should be a 4-star recruit. And, he's this, and this. And I'm like, this is the kid that Vandy fans didn't even want and celebrated his decommitment. I'll give you one guess. I'll end this one on an easy one for you. We'll throw you a softball. How many passes do you think Nash Nance threw at Tennessee?
3.
That's 3 too many.
Hey, that's like I think it was 2013. We're on signing day. And who has the number? I think it's 12 or 13. Who has the number 1 recruiting class? Ole Miss. And I'm like, what? I remember being on the radio. I go, what is it? No, there's no way they did that legally. There's no way. You can't have Ole Miss with Hugh Freeze, where they're never even in the top 15, and then all of a sudden they have the number 1 recruiting class. I said, this is ridiculous. They completely did this under the table. Remember, they had Robert Nkemdiche, the number 1 recruit in the country, and then the number 1 recruiting class. I said, this is ridiculous. And I was right. I'm sorry. I just questioned the whole thing, and I was completely right. I have not been right many times in college football. That was one I knew that was completely baloney when you looked at it.
Well, Mark, this has been a lot of fun. I knew it would be. We will find an excuse to do this again at some point. But tell people if they want to listen to your shows online or if they happen to be in Florida, some of our audience is down there, where they can find you, where they can follow you on Twitter, because you are a fun follow for sure.
Wait a minute. No, they can't know where I'm at, because then my ex-girlfriends will find out. You can't have that.
Okay.
No. Sorry. You can't do it. No, I'm just joking. Mark Moses' show on all the different social media stuff, and then it's on Sports Radio 1560 The Fan. You can listen online at sportsradio1560.com. That is correct. I love coming on with you, buddy. You do a great job, and I always appreciate you coming on my show as well.
Yeah, I'm always happy to. It is always one of the most fun shows I do, because I think we find a way to talk substance, but also kind of to hit the lighter stuff and joke around, and that's what makes this fun.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man, and good luck on the new season.
Thank you so much. He is Mark Moses of WLZR in Melbourne, Florida. I'm Chris Lee, host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with more episodes later this week.